We met with the civil society forum, mainly HIV and AIDS, but in total 18 civil society forum organization that fall under SANAC on the 7th of March. All this time, we're very consistent. Information that we analyzed, we shared with National Treasury. We followed through with a proposal of how we want the money to be allocated and how it could be used. There hasn't been any formal response to say to us that is not enough. And we continue to say, because these are the structures, Tsepiso, of government, and we've gone through them. And I've also responded to a number of questions when we went to Portfolio Committee on Health on what we are doing. There's never been any stage where we were told what you're doing is not correct until we read it in the papers that we're not very consistent. And I don't know what is inconsistent in what we have done.
So another thing that the DA seems to, rather lament is the amount of time that government has taken to claim the Section 16 application to Treasury for emergency relief fund given a cuts. What the Dr. Leroux has just admitted that, up until they made their call, they realized that it was done on the 16th of April. From what I hear, it seems to him and the DA that it was an inordinately long amount of time. Was there a delay in applying for the funding as soon as you knew that there were going to be cuts from PEPFAR and ODA with regards to public health?
Yeah. Again, as I'm saying, I'll just deal with technical matters because I'm not a politician, I'm just a technocrat. To say, remember at first when it happened, it was sudden and nobody knew how long this was going to be. It was a back and forth. It's going to be waivers for 90 days. Waivers were going back. So in that back and forth, we tend to make sense as to really what is the problem. But again, we couldn't have advised the leadership of the department to go to Treasury until we have known exactly the volume, what the size of the ask that we are making to Treasury up to the T. And all that happened while we were also talking to other philanthropic organizations, development partners, because a lot of other people raised their hands to say, we can come to the party, we can help you in this and that way, because we knew at the time, number one, we are approaching the end of the financial year, but we were also saying if we could get money to help us go through. Later, as the back and forth movements happened, we realized that CDC, which is Center for Disease Control component of PEPFAR, was actually coming back to operate as they've been operating. And we realized that we only lost one arm, which was the USAID. So going back and forth around those kind of things, you start counting. And also we didn't want to say to Treasury, give us so much money when we knew we needed little, or give us this little when we needed much. So it's not like there was any stage where it was just sitting down. All this time, we're trying to crunch the numbers. And now we're very clear. And whether to say it was only submitted when it was noise, I don't think that's true, because the work has started when we realized that indeed there's nothing forthcoming from those that we had met. They even met with the minister, promised this and promised that, but nobody came forth with any money to help us intervene. Okay. Then we realized, no, we are on our own here.
I want to, Mr. Morowane, then go back to the figures. As I was saying to Dr. Leroux, I saw from the statement issued when the Minister went to Parliament, the breakdown of figures, how many people were employed or were deployed to some of these NGOs, CSOs, etc., how much they cost, how much money they received, and how much money was being lost. And I asked if they felt that that number or the figures that were given were correct or inadequate. And the answer was, the feeling was that there were some incorrect figures. And Dr. Leroux still online, but he can intervene later if I'm misquoting him, and that there was no clarity. Can you just please tell our listeners, what are the official figures that you have at your disposal of how many people are affected, and what are the amounts?
Tsepiso, I'm going to give you the numbers that are affected, the numbers that we communicated, that they've never changed. South African government is using about the year that ended in the year current 44.4 billion rands in terms of response. And out of that, in terms of the split, 76% of that money is the money that comes from South African government, including the money from private sector. And the split of that 17% is from PEPFAR and 7% is from Global Fund. So we know those figures. The total number of staff that were appointed, which we call patient-facing or public-facing, that were working in our facilities, that we could put the finger on in terms of response, was 15,500, and I'll just get you the last figure now, 15,000. And these are the figures we presented to Parliament, Portfolio Committee, when we invited to present. So it was nothing unclear. And members of the Portfolio Committee were there, and everybody asked questions, and we responded. And the total amount of money that was required for that part was 4.6 billion rands that we needed, which went to the staffing. And the portion of the money from that 4.6, this is the money that was paying for everybody, including the management, middle managers, people that were in the offices doing all sorts of work.
Okay.
And we then decided that if we're going to ask anybody any amount of money, what are we going to be asking the money for? The decision was we must look at ensuring that services are not disrupted, because that was the major issue.
All right. Unfortunately, Mr. Moroane, we have run out of time, but just a quick answer. Is the minister going to acquiesce to this demand by the DA to appear before the Public Committee on Health in Parliament?
I wouldn't know. I'm sure in the political space, there may be processes that are followed.
All right. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Mr. Rampelani Morewane is the Acting Director General for HIV/AIDS, TB, Maternal and Child Health at the Department of Health. And we also spoke to Dr. Carl Leroux, Democratic Alliance Deputy Spokesperson on Health. Thank you both for speaking to us on those developments. It's 9:28.
Thanks very much.
Nighttime radio, just the way you like it, on Channel Africa, where the night comes alive. Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa 1. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa 1. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you'll be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa One. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa One. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
At 28 minutes to 10, we will be bringing you more news on the latest assassination attempt on the leader of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore. But first, let's tell you about the South Africa's emeritus pastor of the Apostolic Faith Mission, Reverend Frank Chikane, says Catholics, Pope Francis will be remembered for speaking out when the church was quiet about the deaths arising from the Gaza-Israel war. Chikane says Pope Francis even reached a stage where he called what was happening in Gaza a genocide. A very contested term as we've seen in the geopolitical space. Now, Pope Francis' passing was announced on Easter Monday. In 2023, Pope Francis also visited the war-torn country of South Sudan. Sisi Sakhalo has more on the story.
Condolences have been pouring in since the passing of Pope Francis on Monday. Emeritus pastor of the Apostolic Faith Mission in South Africa, Reverend Frank Chikane, also passed his condolences. Talking about Pope Francis, he described him as being unique and having showed that uniqueness from the onset of his journey as a pope. Chikane adds Pope Francis also showed total commitment to the cause of justice. Chikane says what stood out for him was him speaking about the Gaza-Israel war.
When the church was quiet about Gaza and the people in Gaza were dying almost like 100 per day, and now we're talking about thousands, he acted as a pastor because his own members of the church were being affected, the schools were bombed. You know, Catholics have got facilities like schools, hospitals, etc. were bombed, and he spoke critically about it. But later he reached a stage where he himself concluded this is genocide. And there are many churches that have not reached that particular stage.
Catholics at Rosebank Catholic Church in the city of Johannesburg will remember Pope Francis as someone who fought for the poor and vulnerable in society and also called for peace. Some members of the church had this to say.
For me, Pope Francis was one of the most modern popes I've known. He was very knowledgeable, but also so human. And I followed his teachings. I bought his book on creation, Laudato Si, and he was very special pope.
Hailed, of course, as the first Pope from the global south, and hailed for his efforts to changed the way in which the church saw things and operated, particularly when it came to compassion or human rights, etc. His body will lie in state tomorrow, and his funeral will take place on Saturday. Now, Burkina Faso's military government says it has foiled yet another major plot to overthrow the junta leader Captain Ibrahim Traore, with the army alleging that the plotters were based in neighboring Ivory Coast. Several officers of the Burkinabe Armed Forces have reportedly been arrested, and two of them relieved of their duties as coup commanders. Reports say Captain Ibrahim Traore, the transitional president, quickly replaced the arrested officers without specifying their number, following the attempt to discuss the future and what is happening. Dr. David Matsanga is a political scientist and international relations expert speaking to us from London. A very good evening to you, Dr. Matsanga. Thank you so much for your patience and for speaking to us.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Africa and across the globe. I join millions and millions to say the last for Pope Francis.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Matsanga. So let's just talk about the latest assassination attempt on Captain Ibrahim Traore. Am I correct in saying is it the 18th, or is a figure a lot more than that?
It is a plot that has been thickened. Several plots have been thickened by France and the United States of America. A few weeks ago or a few days ago, the High Command of AFCOM of United States of America, in their congressional appearance, they said they targeted, fingered out Ibrahim Traore, the younger man, who has transformed Burkina Faso, who has made good changes, who has developed roads, schools, hospitals. They fingered him out and they said they should arrest him or kill him, even do anything to him. So we as Africans, some of us who have been to Burkina Faso, are not surprised that this plot is beginning to show, to be exposed. And of course, the two countries, France and the United States, are behind it.
And I mean, the fact that he has also spoken about what has been a major discussion and stickler point recently, the issue of tariffs and the cutting of aid to Africa, by saying Africa should reserve its energies for self-development, of ensuring better intra-Africa trade. So he has rather radicalized and also inspired quite a lot of Afrocentric thinking in resolving Africa's problems. The presence of AFRICOM, does that then on the continent, and this has also been a matter of discussion in certain countries, do you think that this is also part of the reasons why AFRICOM has been in some of the African countries where it resides and it carries out what it says are routine military exercises?
Yes, AFRICOM is in Zambia. One wonders where the military base should be in inland looking for minerals. There is nothing they are doing. There is nothing like they are keeping. There's no peace you are keeping in Congo. There's no peace you are keeping in Lusaka in Zambia. You are just simply collecting minerals, competing with Chinese. Look, let's be very honest as Africans. South Africa is being targeted according to all these type of things. South Africa is being targeted and being told that you are displacing white commercial farmers. Where is it happening? Lie. So AFCOM pretending to do military drills, military things, they are just looking for a war. They don't want any African progressive country ever to progress, to challenge their authority. They want us to remain second-class citizens. In the UN, they don't want us even to have a seat everywhere. When you bring something like what Ture has done in West Africa, Madam, if you go there, you wouldn't like to come back to South Africa, because the man has developed the place from a corrupt civilian government. Yes, the AU condemns military coups, but some military juntas are better than civilian corrupt government. Yes, look at that place. The president there was only stealing uranium, selling uranium at a cheaper price, pocketing money in Switzerland. And this young man came. There is no country in Africa that has got 400 ambulances motorized with doctors and nurses. This country has them. He bought them instead of buying big cars. You know very well ministers in your country drive the biggest cars, bulletproof. This guy bought ambulances instead of those type of cars. He has done very well, and he warned America, if you bring tariffs, let's not trade. We shall also look for other partners where we can trade our diamond, our gold, our minerals, our uranium. Therefore, that is challenging the so-called powers to be.
So you talk about America, but let's talk about the role of France, for instance. One of the first people to reject the presence of the French in Burkina Faso, that is Captain Traoré. He is Pan-Africanist, anti-imperialist, like his forefather, Thomas Sankara. But what is there to link the U.S., and if we're talking factually here, the U.S. and France, if a possible protagonist in this coup attempt, with Ivory Coast? Because the security forces in Burkina Faso say that the people who are behind the coup are from Cote d'Ivoire.
Yeah, paid by who? Not Cote d'Ivoire. What is Cote d'Ivoire? It's a French puppet. You remember Babougo and Ouattara? It's a French. Ouattara is a French, was installed. I and Mbeki were busy there negotiating peace so that Babougo does not go to the ICC. I remember with President Thabo Mbeki and Chisano, we were in Abidjan. Even we were one of the last group that left Abidjan when the French took sides on Ouattara. So what is in Cote d'Ivoire? It is France. France mans Cote d'Ivoire. France gives Cote d'Ivoire directions. France feeds Cote d'Ivoire. It pays. They pay France. They take everything to Paris, then come back and divide something little. So if the coup originated from Cote d'Ivoire, remember, 3/4 of Burkinabe people are also in Cote d'Ivoire. And it is rumored that Ouattara himself is a Burkinabe. So that is one of the reasons why Babougo and the Burkinabe and Mr. Ouattara went to war, because the original Cote d'Ivoire people said, you are not from our country. So, my sister, there is nothing that cannot be done. These are the French people themselves paying Cote d'Ivoire to go and overthrow, because they cannot come directly. The world will scream at them. Okay. They are now using proxies. And remember, there is another state, Nigeria, which is gone, and Nigeria works. Tinubu was in Paris for 2 weeks. He doesn't go to Britain, which was the former colonial master. He goes there because people have laid warrants to pick them for human rights abuses in UK courts. So he goes now to Paris. And this Tinubu is the chairperson of ECOWAS. When the military took over, he threatened to invade these places and take over and restore civilian corrupt governments. So we have plots.
I want to talk, Dr. Matsanga, about ideological change in the leadership of the African continent through the African Union and other regional bodies on the continent in terms of the philosophy that Captain Traoré espouses. You spoke about the fact that because he is a coup leader, many people want to turn a blind eye to the good that he does. There's been a lot of conversation about military overreach, but there has also been what is being called benevolent autocracy. Do you think that there will be an ideological change where people look at the quality of leadership and not how it came about? And that is not to say the illegal usurpation of power should also be promoted.
I think time has come for African Union to reform the whole charter, because there are good military governments that have come in place. prepare the transition, exit power, handed over power, when they have stabilized their countries. We shouldn't condemn. This was double standards. Look at Chad. The former chairperson of African Union did not suspend Chad. They killed the president. They got his son. They bypassed the vice president. They never sanctioned Chad because he comes from there. Double standards. The Charter for African Union must be overhauled. This charter was made in 1963. It is simply a charter that came into effect in 2012, and it says any military government that comes through a military coup. But there are some military coups that are justifiable in Africa.
All right. Dr. Matsanga, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I'd like us to continue this conversation. Dr. David Matsanga, political scientist and international relations expert, speaking to us about the latest coup attempt in Burkina Faso. Let's look at the time. It brings us to 14 minutes to 10. We continue with more news here on Africa World Hour.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
What's happening in your world? Well, we'll tell you what's happening in Accra, in Ghana. The heads of state and government of the Economic Community of West African States launched on Tuesday the 50th anniversary celebrations of the regional bloc established in 28 May 1975 in Lagos, Nigeria. ECOWAS is recognized as one of Africa's most effective regional economic communities. The Golden Jubilee launch marks the start of year-long activities across all member states. Joining us now from Ghana is our correspondent there, Eric Mawena. Eric, tell us what has marked this anniversary, this Jubilee anniversary. As we mentioned, it echoes one of the most successful regional blocs on the continent. Was that the mood? Was that the sentiment?
Well, certainly it was. It was one of reflection as well, looking at the journey 50 years ago was envisioned by the respective heads of state in the month of May when they came together seeking to set up this regional bloc, which, like you've mentioned, has been described as one of the most successful on the African continent. A fair few things they've sought to do, which hasn't quite come together just as yet. Most notable will be the use of one currency, the ECO. That's been mooted for quite a while, and that continues to be one of the niggling things that they've not been able to just get across as a bloc just as yet. But it certainly was a day which signified reflection 50 years on, and to plan as well for the future in forging ahead on what it is that can be done, specifically on regional integration, dealing with the issues of terrorism, and as well military takeovers. That has become the subject matter which has dominated the bloc for quite a while. 3 military changes which have resulted in the subsequent military heads leaving the bloc. That as well featured quite significantly in the conversations. The head of ECOWAS head of state, who wasn't present but sent the foreign affairs minister in his country, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to speak on his behalf, had issues to raise on how the bloc needs to deal with growing terrorism, which continues to feature quite prominently whenever discourse about ECOWAS comes up strongly, as well as stemming the tide against a possible rise in military dictatorship as well. And so it was that reflective, but as well, there are quite pressing issues in and around the bloc, which immediately requires some attention, and one that there was a general sense of acceptance as to a lot more work that needs to be done to have those resolved as quickly as possible.
And I want to talk about that. It has a 2050 vision, that of ECOWAS of states or ECOWAS of peoples, which is really anchored on lasting peace. And we know that the region faces a great deal of conflict. Has there been talk about the progress of reaching this goal?
Well, for talk about talk about progress in reaching the goal, it continues to be one that every now and then features strongly. Already, there is a network of these West African countries which have been working in dealing with the issue of terrorism, and so they have resorted to sharing intelligence, also known as the Accra Conference, which was kickstarted a while back, where they are sharing intelligence in order to battle or deal with the aspect of terrorism. With more recent issues of breakaways and the growing tide of military dictatorship, we saw that ECOWAS wanted to take a very high-handed approach, particularly in the early days of Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the chair of the heads of state. Ghana's new President John Mahama, appears to take a very different approach. In fact, he took the turn to invite the military heads of these three Sahel countries to be a part of the 50th, the Golden Jubilee celebration today. Unfortunately, they were not present, but he spent a considerable chunk of his speech today on that and the need for diplomatic communication to be re-established with these countries and for ECOWAS not to give up on them. And so he is championing that quite strongly. Even before he took office, he made it a point to visit these Sahel countries. In fact, the Burkinabe leader made a historic visit to Ghana during his inauguration as well. And so he is championing. Outside of the ceremony which marked the commencement of the 50th anniversary celebration, there was a conference as well for the ministers of foreign affairs, which is expected to continue into tomorrow as well. And that features dominantly what is being done to strengthen ties with these Sahel countries and then improve peace in the region as well. That's where a lot of the conversation is happening. It started today with different individual groupings from within speaking exclusively to that as well.
Eric, let's end it there for now. Of course, we will continue speaking with you not only throughout the day, but throughout the year as this continues. As we mentioned, there are going to be year-long events across countries to speak about the 50th or Jubilee anniversary of ECOWAS. Our correspondent in Ghana, Eric Mawena Ebeta. It is now 7 minutes to, actually it's now 7 minutes to 9. So let's continue with our last interview here. Now, it's a report by Amnesty International. It says Ghanaian authorities have failed to protect and fulfill the human rights of hundreds of victims of witchcraft accusations and ritual attacks that forced them to flee their communities, fearing for their lives. For more on this report, we're joined on the line by Martha Kaloma, Amnesty International West and Central Africa Senior Campaigner. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so interesting that we're having this conversation. I had a conversation with someone very recently about what is believed in the African culture as manifestations or characteristics of witchcraft. So what are we talking about here when we talk about witchcraft, suspected witchcraft practice?
Hello, everybody, and thanks so much for having me. Actually, we are talking about the consequences of witchcraft accusations. We don't judge any kind of beliefs. We know that witchcraft beliefs are protected under international law by the freedom of thought. But what we are condemning is the consequences of these beliefs and these accusations, and especially in terms of the people that are suffering these accusations.
So it's not about judging, but surely as a campaigner, you would have an idea of the beliefs that people subscribe to, and some of them are quite harmful. It's not about judgment. For instance, people with mental diseases like dementia in South Africa would sometimes be accused of witchcraft. So I just want to understand, not only in the country context, but the regions that you work in, what are beliefs of suspected witchcraft?
Yeah, sure. The thing is, we visited, an Amnesty delegation has been visiting these camps and interviewing these women that had been accused. And usually, the accusations, they come just for bad misfortune just someone gets sick, someone dies, and then some member of the family or a neighbor of the community says to a woman, usually, I've seen you in dreams, and I have been going a visit and spiritual guide and told me that you are the originator of this death. It's you who caused the death of my son, of my daughter. So at that time, that woman, just at that moment, that woman is accused of being a witch in front of a community, and the only way they have to escape is abandoning the community and abandoning their life and going to these camps that usually are in the north of the country.
And comprehensively combating these stereotypical actions of accusing people of witchcraft. What are the legal frameworks? Is there a way of not necessarily criminalizing expression, freedom of expression, but we're talking about witchcraft accusations and ritual attacks?
Yes, we Amnesty International is advocating for a law that criminalizes accusations because of the impact and the consequences of these accusations. We have been reporting cases of people, of women, all women that have been beaten until they have been killed by members of the communities. So we know that there should be a legal framework to stop this kind of accusations because of the consequences that they have on this on people accused, especially because accusations really destroy lives. These women have to abandon their communities, abandon their families. They have to go to live in these camps where they have really difficulties in terms of getting food, getting water, access to health. So for us, it's really important to stop people, because there are some people in a lot of cases, these accusations, they come just because of discrimination. And they are women, they are old, they are living alone. They're women that do not conform gender stereotypes. So they are accused randomly by members of the community, and they don't have any kind of defense. The only way that they have to survive is to run away. So that Amnesty is promoting, wants the government to promote, and we advocate for a law that criminalizes accusations. But at the same time, we know that changing the legal framework is not going to be enough. There are other things that should be implemented. We are also advocating for a national campaign to people to understand, that sensitize about the impact of these accusations, that people cannot accuse other people freely because they are destroying this life and these women are suffering.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us, and hope to follow up on that discussion further, and also look at your report that you released in February on witchcraft accusations. Marta Coloma, Amnesty International, Western Central Africa senior campaigner. 2 minutes to 10 as we head towards hotlines this evening. Ms. Shayla.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, what's happening tonight?
So, tonight we are going to be looking at international...
Why are you sounding so demure?
Listen, demure, mindful, thoughtful, everything. Everything in a bag of chips. So, we're looking at International Mother Earth Day, which is also known as International Earth Day, right? And so, we're going to be speaking to Miss Earth, right, who will be joining us on the line, and she'll be walking us through the necessity to observe certain days such as this. I think more often than not, we think, if I plant a tree and I live my life, it's okay, or if I don't litter, then I'll be fine. But how are we contributing to the preservation of our earth as a whole is what we're looking at in the first hour. And then in the second hour, we're going to be asking people, what does it mean to love nature? What does that mean? Does it mean exploring nature? Does it mean keeping nature clean? Does it mean talking about it? I think those dynamics are also important for us to gauge.
And obviously, loving yourself is loving your environment. I mean, the two go hand in hand. You know, if you love yourself, you make sure that your environment is able to love you back.
Here you are poking holes in other people's theories. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So, right, listen up to Hotlines later on. It is time for us to say goodbye to you and wish you happy Tuesday. And thank you so much for listening to Africa World Hour. Do enjoy the rest of you listening here and watching on Channel Africa. It's good night from us.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Hotlines bring you fresh perspectives about love after dark with Sheila Dukumana.